Here we are, here we go. So that's what we heard initially in our song. And an official welcome to the launch of our Regenerative Evaluation Living Paper. And to orient ourselves, this is the flow for today's session. We will start with a living welcome and then introduce core chapters, the essence of the living paper, before we have a panel conversation with the contributors to bring in the personal perspectives and experiences. You will then have the chance to engage with others in breakouts and to dive deeper into what you have heard before we then explore together what the future of regenerative evaluation can be. And this is really important to all of us because what we are sharing is, what I said earlier, genuine labor of love by a community. And this means all of us. And all of you are invited to step in and to shape what this is going to become. A bit of housekeeping as well. So with this number of people joining, please keep muted unless you are asked to speak. And as I said earlier, to turn off your video if you don't want to be recorded. For tech issues, you can reach out to Johannes Hochholzer in chat, who is the tech host for today's session. And also you will see Hannah Connor is quite active in chat, who is supporting with sending all the information that you can then also access. Slides and recording will be shared with you as well after the session. And to already say, the breakouts are optional. So you can choose to join, and usually it's a valuable experience. But of course, you don't have to. And also as an invitation to actively use chat for any questions, any ideas, anything that is sparked within you. And now inviting all of us into our living welcome, which we learned about from our friends at Greater Than. We welcome people of all descents, ethnicities, and heritages. We welcome you from all the different countries you are joining in from. We welcome all languages spoken here and all nonverbal forms of communication. We acknowledge the challenges and limitations that may come from using English as our primary language in that space. We welcome people with disabilities, visible and invisible, whilst acknowledging we are on a journey to make sure everyone's needs are accommodated with grace. We welcome people of all genders and sexualities. We welcome people with all faiths and cultural practices. We welcome people from all...
Yannick, you just muted yourself.
Well, that's weird. I didn't click. Thank you for highlighting that. Not sure since when. Let's go here. We welcome people from all different work and learning experiences. We welcome people of all ages and biological and soul. We welcome the multiplicity, the contradictions, and the full range of our emotional lives and expressions. We welcome those who support you to be here, those who are dear to us, living or otherwise, human or otherwise. Thank you for being part of this event with us, and from the bottom of our hearts, as your facilitators, welcome. And with this, I am handing over to Geetha. And you are also on mute.
Classic Zoom thing that we've noticed. Again, I just want to say I'm so deeply grateful. My heart feels so full to see so many people around the world, and I see some folks locally for where I'm located. So thank you for that. But we just wanted to start off with a bit of an activity to get us moving, or at least grabbing something. We wanted to give you about 30-ish seconds to find something in and around your desk or the room that you're in that represents how you feel about monitoring and evaluation right now, what it looks like. So, we're not judging. There's no right or wrong objects, but if you want to take 30 seconds or so to grab something, maybe just, you can, if you would like, we invite you to kind of show it in the screen if you like. Yeah, oh, I see some animals. I see some blankets. So yeah, we'll just give you 30 seconds or so. Oh, so curious. Love it. Scissors, okay. Scrolling through here. Amazing. Oh, I love all the images. This is so fun. Okay, so we're gonna just sort of take a look. All the different ways that evaluation might feel like. Do you have time, Yannick, to invite a few people to share out loud what they're holding?
Well, maybe one or two.
Yeah. Ooh. All right. Does anyone want to unmute themselves? I'll do the choice there.
See, I'm not the only one with a plant, so that makes me happy.
I saw someone with a deck of cards and holding two objects. So
I've got the deck of cards because it feels a bit like a game of luck, whether you get it right or not, and whether anyone will answer your questions or not.
Okay, thank you for that. Love that. And then I saw someone pick up. Yeah.
I have a stone here, and I think because we're always talking about evaluation, something very hard, very difficult, and can be really, really strong. But if you turn it around like this, what I hope to get from today is there is a little heart inside in this.
Oh, I love that. You know what? Thank you for sharing, Marianne. Lovely. Okay. And so I'd love to hear more of this. So even post-session, share these objects because I'm curious. But I know want to make the most of our time today. So we just want to take a moment. If you could write in the chat, what do you want it to feel like? What would you kind of put the object in the chat? What is the object you wish represented evaluation? And maybe drop that into the chat. We'd love to take a few seconds and write what you'd love it to feel like or be like. Love it. Oh, it's like clouds are alive, a lovely garden, illuminating, community. Exciting. Yes. Love, Brendan from golf. I know that's see that? Nice. Human stories. As a glue that threads stories. Thank you so much. Take a moment, just sort of read some of those responses. How's that feel? Beautiful dawn. Yes. It's so wonderful to read these responses of what we want it to feel like and be. And I think the community of practice that Yannick shared is that we believe it can feel different and it should feel different. And so really excited to, again, have everyone here to explore this together and that it's a living, moving, emerging thing. So thank you. And thanks for that. And I'll pass it back to Yannick.
Thank you. Thank you, Geeta. Thank you, everybody, for participating. And now I would love to share some background on what brought us here to then just emphasize again the invitation to move forward together and to bring some of these objects or wishes for evaluation also to life together. So I will start by sharing a bit on how it all began. So looking back on 2.5 years in community and many of us having, of course, been working in evaluation and grappling with some of these questions for much longer. So this is a screenshot I pulled up from the very first minutes of our very first community of practice session. So it's 8 of us gathering. I think it was a July 2023. And you can see some of us are still around. Hi, Katie. Hi, Matea. And Lila as well. So that was the first conversation where basically we put out this question, like, what is regenerative evaluation? Did anybody work with it or think about this? And since then, we evolved the community of practice. We gathered in person in Denmark, where Kirsten invited the community, and some of us we gathered, and we had the chance to actually dive deeper and also just, weave this personal tapestry and share our personal experiences. So since then, it has been a continuous inquiry. So over the years, we had sessions on topics such as defining regeneration with Federico, and, for example, emphasize the importance of integration. So it's not regeneration, or it's really and how can this be an invitation to bridge and to integrate. Exploring place as a participant in evaluation and theory and practice. So we'll hear more about that from Katie. The Scale 4D model, Tim, equity and belonging-centered systems change, Agnes, who I think is also here with us today. So some of these questions that we had the chance as a community to share about and also to practice and to embody. And right now, where we are, we basically grew very organically, word of mouth mostly. So right now it's 80 people, more or less, in the community of practice. We are working on an online platform and also a LinkedIn page, and we already have some themes for further sessions where members express their interest in diving into, which, for example, is about embodied ML, which is around relational data infrastructures. Ariel, who I've also seen here today. So, and the one central piece, I would say, that we then decided to work on, which I think was more or less a year ago, is to say, how can we write about this? How can we write about regenerative evaluation? Are we even the ones who should write about this? And so this is why we framed it as a living paper, because we felt like this is, or it has so much potential, and there's a yearning, there's a relevance for this kind of work. So we don't want to say what regenerative evaluation is. What we want to do is basically write in the best of our abilities, our experiences, how we are trying to conceptualize this and setting this up as an inquiry, as a living practice. And this is why we started working on the living paper. And we are delighted to tell you that we are live. You might have seen the short version, the 3-page summary. And now in the blog article that we have linked, if you scroll down to the very bottom, you can download, I think, a 89-page document, which is the Regenerative Evaluation Living Paper. To give you an overview of what's inside. So the main chapters, acknowledgements, transparency, and then welcome to regenerative evaluation, where we also emphasize the personal perspectives that we bring to this work. Then the roots, which goes into the theoretical foundations and how it relates to other evaluation approaches. And the heart, one could say, which is about the principles and practices, with some of the visuals that you might also have seen in the sign up and on LinkedIn. There is a chapter also on frameworks and methods, and to already emphasize, there is not one framework, there is not one method for regenerative evaluation. This is really more an invitation to see, depending on context, what works for your evaluation practice. So we are offering some frameworks, we are reflecting on methods and when to use which kinds of methods so that they support a regenerative inquiry. There are some thoughts on applying regenerative evaluation, and we have been to a certain extent because, well, we are live now. So we have written up the principles now, but in the last year, some of us, we have been thinking about this and implementing it one way or the other already. So we have 2 case studies, one on shaping an inclusive entrepreneurship sector in Germany and transition together. Looking ahead, which is inviting different scenarios of where this could go. And now we will go through the first chapters chronologically and sharing a bit more on what's inside. So starting with the acknowledgements and the contributors, and that's all the people who have contributed to this living paper. So Katie, Kirsten, Tim, Matea, Geetha, who are also with us today, and then Lila, who has been absolutely instrumental I would say, in keeping us on track, in shaping the guiding questions, and also creating the visuals. Unfortunately, she is hosting an in-person event currently in Morocco, so I think it's a good excuse to not be here, but we are missing her. The shoulders we stand on, there are so many, so we just want to acknowledge some of the lineages that have informed this inquiry, us personally and as a group, which is wisdom and indigenous knowledge traditions, decolonial feminist critical scholars and activists, the pioneers of complexity science, which personally I'm a big fan of, developmental evaluation and systems thinking, and also the monitoring and evaluation practitioners in general in the space that has been created. We also want to highlight that all of this work is Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike. So basically what this means is you can run with it. You can adjust it, you can adjust the texts, change things, as long as you attribute the regenerative evaluation community of practice as the source of the paper. And also a note on the hosting organization Unity Effect. So we are a social enterprise, I'm also co-founder of Unity Effect. And among others, our role is providing the infrastructure, facilitation, team capacity to bring this work to life. There is no background funding, so this fully runs on passion and just the belief that we know this is valuable. And also steering the growth and the development of this network. And we see ourselves as a partner in the ecosystem. So learning alongside you of what regenerative evaluation can be. And there is a confession to make, which is that we used AI in the process. So, which has been as a writing companion, as a sense-making companion, and also for visuals and designs. And I'm saying that because without the use of large language models and other tools, we would not have been able to put this living paper together. And we really hope that the human element still stayed in the center of everything. Because we also know on the other side that these tools are extracting resources from the natural world and are also problematic as a social technology. So we are holding this tension between the opportunities and also the challenges. Now, let's dive into regenerative evaluation. And I would love to start with a quote from the living paper. As I said, our intention is not to define it. Our intention is to speak to it and to illuminate what it is and can be. So evaluation can be much more than a retrospective measure of past performance. Rather than extracting data solely to look backward, it can be a living practice that helps a system sense its own health and navigate uncertainty. Regenerative evaluation is evaluation in service of life. There are two guided questions that we put out in the paper. One is the systems question. How can measurement contribute to better decision-making, learning, adaptability, and evidence? And there is also a regenerative question. How can the process of evaluation itself contribute to our mutual flourishing? And this again speaks to the potential to bridge. And this going deeper brings up questions around power, around who actually defines what is being measured as success, etc. The roots, chapter 2 of regenerative evaluation. And here I will keep this relatively short. There's more in the paper. And basically explain what we attempt, or also an opportunity we see in regenerative evaluation, and that is by weaving 3 major strands of evaluation practice together. And one of them is the systemic and complexity-aware approaches. So this is developmental evaluation. This is complexity-aware monitoring, for example. So really honoring all the work that has been done to grapple with complex adaptive systems. There are also the power conscious and justice oriented approaches to evaluation. So indigenous evaluation, feminist evaluation, equitable evaluation. And basically it's all the work in a way that has, or for us, raises the question, if we evaluate in systems that are shaped by injustice, not acknowledging justice will basically perpetuate injustice. So it's really grounding our evaluation practice in this understanding that we cannot be neutral and power always plays a role. And then lastly, ecological and sustainability-centered approaches that highlight that there's more than us humans. Crazy, but it's true, right? So we are part of this web of life, and how can we also acknowledge the systems we are part of? With this, let's go into the principles and practices of regenerative evaluation, starting with the principles. And so this is an overview, and this has been developed in community. So I remember the initial brainstormings, and Kirsten and I, our evening sessions that we had on Fridays, and really thinking, how can this be formalized in a way, or written up community sessions we had. I'll just read it out loud with the invitation for you to also sense, feel, think, how does it land? Is there a principle that specifically sparks your curiosity, but maybe also brings up tension? Align with the cyclical rhythms of life, which is honoring periods of wintering and composting. Cultivate self-awareness and reflexivity, recognizing that evaluators are not neutral observers, but are active participants. Time as teacher, honoring the deep past while nurturing life-affirming futures. Shift power and center marginalized voices. Transition ownership of evaluation to the community. Honor place, story, and lived experience, rejecting copy-paste solutions in favor of context-specific lived experience. Nurture system vitality, focusing on the health of relationships and feedback loops within a system. Unearth and amplify innate potential. So rejecting a deficit mindset to identify innate strength and assets. Embrace iterative learning and emergence, shifting from predict and control to sense and respond. Center love as a force for transformation, viewing evaluation as a fierce commitment to the flourishing of the system and the people within it. And now I invite you to go to chat and type quickly the number of the principle that you are most curious about. So here they are still numbered from 1 to 9, and then we will present 1 or 2 in more detail. Seeing some numbers flying in. Somebody said 1 for 9.
I've been seeing a lot of 6 as well.
6 is confirmed. Let's see. 9's flying in. Nice Corvette. All right. Let's go with 6 and 9. So nurture system vitality and center love as force for transformation. So I'll just quickly jump through the slides. And this is also, like in the living paper, each principle has 1 full page dedicated to it. So nurture system vitality, to recognize that a system is more than a collection of parts. It is a web of relationships. This principle invites us to shift our gaze from individual components to the health of the connections that bind them. It asks us to tend to the connective tissue, the relationships, feedback loops, and flows of information that determine whether a system stagnates or thrives. It posits that true vitality is found not just in function, but in the flourishing of the whole. And what we then have in the paper is some reflections on practices and also shadow sides of each of the principles. So an example of a practice is to tend to relationships and patterns. So we focus as much on the quality of connections as the nodes themselves. We look for governing dynamics, where trust flows, where communication blocks, and what feedback loops reinforce current behaviors. And as a shadow side, the complexity trap. So getting so lost in mapping the interconnectedness of everything that we fall into analysis paralysis, becoming unable to take a simple, practical next step. And in the paper, you can go into each of the principles in this way. And with this, Aoife, if you can speak to Principle 9.
Yeah, so Principle I center love as a force for transformation. I love to see that people have been excited and energized by this. And here's a love-shaped rock. I can't see myself, so I don't know if you're seeing it. And find these hearts everywhere. Love is particularly important to me in the work and how I approach it. And a colleague of mine here is on the line, Brendan, and we talk about love a lot. So I'll read this out. To recognize that at the root of all regeneration is an impulse to care for life. This principle breaks the taboo of the neutral professional, invites us to bring our full humanity into the room. It defines love not as sentimentality, but as a fierce commitment to the wholeness and flourishing of the systems we serve. It asks us to move from viewing evaluation as a transaction to viewing it as an act of deep care. And just as Yannick mentioned in the paper, so kind of what does that might look like in practice? There's so many ways. And one of it is sort of dissolving that professional armor that we wear. So we refuse to reduce people to data points. We allow ourselves to be moved by what we witness, bridging the distance between evaluator and subject. We recognize that we cannot heal a system we keep at arm's length. So love is, and what I love about this is it also can show up that tension. So there's also shadow sides of every principle and place. So sometimes there can be a boundary collapse. So becoming so emotionally enmeshed that we lose the clarity needed to be a helpful mirror, or taking on the trauma of the system without the resources to sustain ourselves, which can lead to burnout. So that's sort of where the principles lie now. And then there's so much to unpack and cover in that. That's further detailed in the paper. And again, with conversations about these principles is what brings me joy and excitement and energy into this living paper. Love to hear that. Yeah.
And to also say, this principle, we had 8 originally, and then we had actually a community session on love and evaluation. And it just resonated so much that we decided to add Principle 9. So with this, moving to the practices. So the practices basically are there to help orient us as we go through an evaluation cycle. And these emerged at the in-person retreat, which I mentioned earlier. And what we did there was, sharing about our personal experiences and also sharing about evaluation practices and just imagining how it would look like to approach evaluation from a deeply regenerative place. And we wrote these process steps on stones and carried them home to be stewards of that specific stone or practice. And out of this emerged this cycle, which also is the cover page of the report, which speaks to 3 main phases that have specific practices. So phase 1, grounding and design, which, for example, is about empathetic understanding, mapping ecosystem contribution, more intentional and regenerative design of an evaluation process. We have the phase of tending and inquiry, which, for example, includes evaluative coaching, which I really try to remind myself of, that as an evaluator, I'm also a facilitator and a coach at the same time. So how can I support people, systems to develop capacities? And it's about meaningful data collection. And then also phase 3, which is about harvesting and replanting, and in that sense also emphasizing the cyclical nature, so which is about joint sense making and strategic storytelling. And again, in the living paper, there is one page dedicated to each of these practices. And we are aware that barely any evaluation project follows that cycle chronologically. So this is more to give inspiration and to remind ourselves of where are we in a project, in a process, and what are the practices that might support us in that very moment. With this, moving to the last chapter that we are going to introduce here now, which is on frameworks and methods, because then the question is, with these principles and practices, how can we bring this to life in an evaluation project? And starting with the frameworks, as said earlier, there is not one regenerative framework, but multiple. And in the paper, we speak to 3 frameworks that were developed by members of the community. And we also mention other frameworks. And what could be better than actually listening to the people that created these different evaluation frameworks, starting with Scale 3D. Tim.
Yeah, so just to give you a quick teaser, basically, the key idea here is that looking at impact, not just in terms of results out there in the world, but looking at the capacities we need to cultivate within initiatives and networks. And to give you a brief taster, I invite you to follow me, if you can see me, with 3 gestures. So one gesture is from extending the arms up and bringing them down as a gesture of deepening the change that we want to see. It's like bringing from an idea, from a vision, and really bringing it into embodied change and embedded change in culture and systems. And then widening is about spreading seeds of possibility and spreading stories and innovations while being attuned to and adapting to different context needs. And the lengthening, that's the key innovation here, is about sustaining change over time. So really the temporal dimension of longevity, continuity, and ongoing evolution of change processes. That's me.
Thank you so much. And you might share more in chat if you want to read more and connect to Tim and his Scale 3D model. Thank you. Katie.
Hello, everyone. So this is a regenerative evaluation framework that has grounding, developing, weaving, and evolving in the center. And that's kind of the core and the essence of what I've learned about regenerative evaluation in my practice. And it kind of zooms out and weaves and connects to a larger, greater whole. So the grounding is into place and understanding place-sourced wisdom and practices, honoring the ancestors, who you've come from, where you've come from, the community you're in now. While situating yourself and developing those skills and capabilities and understandings of how to be relationally connected to place and people and all living things. What does it mean to be a good relative as a regenerative evaluation practitioner? And how are we weaving and connecting with the living systems, the water, the land, the ecologies of life that surround us, and understand what those effects are on our lives and health and well-being, and reconciling understanding that might bridge intercultural ways of being and relating and connecting and learning. The other piece is this evolving, and that's really kind of keeping in mind that there's a future that we're all of service to. This is the future for generations to come. This is a planet that will be sustained through regenerative evaluation practices and community that are connected and grounded into place. And you're absolutely right. This does kind of stem from Indigenous ways of knowing. There's more in the paper on this, but for right now, it's the 1-minute little teaser, and I'll put my contact information in the chat as well.
Thank you so much. And both Tim and Katie, I think you spent lots of time being present with this, also writing your PhDs about these models or with these models. So, and the third one is the impact garden, which we've developed at Unity Effect, which basically introduces a living systems metaphor to designing an evaluation framework. So, and in doing that, it adds certain dimensions that many of the more linear models do not have. So a very strong emphasis on the resources that actually sustain a project, on governance and roles, and also on the cyclical nature of change. And in doing so, I think shifts the conversation from we have to produce outcome A and B to tending to the soil or creating the conditions for change, or also certain desired longer term changes actually take root and take place. And again, we will share more about this in chat if you're curious. All right. Last thing before we transition to the panel is the methods. So next to the frameworks in the paper, we also speak about methods. And here we introduce the idea of the methods mosaic, so that a given project basically draws on different methods to be meaningfully combined. And we have mapped certain methods against the phases in an evaluation project. Not going into much more detail here. Because of this, I would love to see all contributors to the paper join me in the middle and have a dialogue. And in the meantime, also as an invitation for all of you, just to take a breath and feel what shows up. Maybe also take a note if there is something, right now as a thought, as an action step, but maybe more just as a reflection. Just take a quick note of that. Wonderful. So let's start with you, Katie. And in your work, you speak about the role of place and place-sourced evaluation. And it would be wonderful to hear from you your reflections on why you think place is so essential in evaluation.
Well, let's start with who we are all on this call and where our feet are on this call. If anybody is not in a place, please raise your hand. Yeah, I didn't think so. So place is kind of a universal. It's a thing that you can't ignore, you can't get away from. But one thing that I've learned about place is that there's this really important distinction in the ways that evaluators are thinking about and relating to and connecting with place. There's a place-based approach that evaluators take, which is kind of thinking about things in man-made maps, lines, jurisdictions, boundaries, things that are determined based off of how your own culture and perception of what place looks like is on a piece of paper that might look like a map. Then there's this like place-sourced way of knowing, and a place-sourced way of knowing is thinking about the planetary evolution of that place, and the ways that it's been settled into and or colonized, right? And the like belief systems that stem from that. And one of the things that I oftentimes do is I encourage people to click on this link that I just popped in the chat. And if you're here within the kind of like North American or South American context, you're going to be able to see some history of whose land, right, you're on. The original stewards and caretakers are oftentimes the Aboriginal Indigenous people to place. There's a place source wisdom that they bring into understanding the relationship of the living patterns of place and the spirit of place. And when I look at this on the other side of the pond, so to say, and our friends over on the European side of things, there's information missing. And so when I think of like place-based as opposed to place-sourced, I lean towards regenerative evaluation being a place-sourced practice. And as a non-Indigenous person who is from a settler descent in a place that holds this history of being the site of the largest mass execution on US soil, it was in December 26th of 1862, where 38 Dakota warriors were hung in our downtown, less than a mile from where my feet touch right now. And if I only come in thinking about place in terms of a neighborhood or a map or a line that says this is how big this is and this is what we're looking at when we think of place, I'm going to miss some things. And it's going to challenge the validity of my work if I don't understand the true history and the story of place. So who I come from and where I come from is just as important in situating myself into place as it is in being relationship to place, and seeing place as a participant and working in partnership as praxis with our Indigenous brothers and sisters in the work. And really truly trying to regenerate from place source knowing that has that deep time and deep context and deep history and sees place as a relative. And when we don't have place's voice integrated into our work as evaluators, we're challenging our own validity of our results. And so it's an invitation to explore with like some deep curiosity and humility about what does that mean for your role and responsibility as a regenerative evaluation practitioner, and how are you working with place in the ways that you are doing your evaluation work under the guise of regenerative evaluation. I see place as a critical component for being a regenerative evaluation practice.
Thank you. And also in our conversations and reading your reflection also in the paper, so this shift from place-based to place-sourced and place as a participant really deeply resonated. Thank you. And on this, we're hearing from you, Kirsten. So you're a longtime evaluator and background also in the complexity aware and the systemic approaches, and also there part of the working group of the European Evaluation Society. So if you want to speak to complexity, science, systems thinking as it relates to a regenerative evaluation.
Sure. I'll try to do this briefly. It's a pretty big topic. But systems thinking and complexity science is really, really a fundamental aspect to me, and what is a part of regenerative evaluation, and which is also what brought me into this space. And I think, there's so much that goes into this. I mean, it's about living systems, and those are complex adaptive systems, and understanding how living systems, how they exist, but also how we can strengthen system health, how we can bring out you know, the best, the flourishing in a system. And so I think there are a lot of systems-based approaches, and there's a ton that we can learn from complexity science. I think in the living paper right now, we don't go into this at all in depth. So that's one area that we can really, really build on, I think, in this space, because I think it's really key. But it's about how it's about relationships, about different perspectives, the dynamics of the system, and how we can look for system health. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hopefully.
I know how huge the topic is. So, and what rabbit hole it can be. Thank you so much. And you spoke to something which is about system health. And that brings us also to you, Tim, because alongside your PhD, you also applied evaluation and looked specifically at evaluating transformative capacity of networks. And I imagine that many of you here are also working for or in networks. So if you could speak to that.
Yeah, so my work draws mainly on networks of grassroots community-based sustainability initiatives like eco-villages or permaculture, transition towns, and the translocal networks that connect these very local initiatives. And my emphasis in the Scale 3D model on looking at of evaluating capacities, deepening capacities, widening and lengthening capacities, is sort of a shift of focus from results and impacts that are often like very hard to ascertain and take a long time and difficult to attribute. And there's the focus on capacities helps to more focus on to what extent are members of the network that you're serving, like the Eco-Village network, for instance, able to really embody and act core values and principles and deeper systemic practices. And so that's, for instance, deepening capacities, which then over time leads to systemic change, hopefully. And so that distinction between the capacities and impacts can help to focus on the more sort of tangible, perhaps, or more readily traceable outcomes, you could say, at the level of the target groups or the beneficiaries, members of a network that you're stewarding, and the longer term systemic changes. And I think a key shift of attention is also to not only look at the capacities for deepening, for bringing about more fundamental change, the capacities for widening, for spreading, and in adapting to different contexts, but especially the capacity for lengthening, for sustaining not just impacts and changes in the long run, but also sustaining those who are working on change, right? The change makers that are often burning out because of lack of resources or unable to navigate conflict with grace and constructive ways of dealing with challenges. So yeah, it brings that sort of more holistic view of what are the inner and the relational capacities needed within a network that then can bring about fundamental, widespread, and lasting change over time.
And you've hinted to something that I think is a big motivation for most of us to be here, and that is that we are working towards systemic change, and it's difficult, and it's personal, and well, that's why we're also curious to hear from you, Etha, because I know, and you reflect on this also in the paper. So this question on actually what brings you to evaluation and what keeps you in evaluation and your personal background and experience. You can speak to that.
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, perhaps for some of you, I don't know how true it is. You said, you were born to be in evaluation, like that was your dream to fall into monitoring and evaluation. For me, I think what brought me into field was three things: for other people to be heard, understood, and feel they were not alone. And I think for me that stems as partly where I was born. I was born in India, and I grew up in Prince Edward Island. So I guess Eastern India and then the East Coast. And they didn't always jive in ways that were interesting and curious. So for me, growing up, I was always curious about how others were living, just because I needed to adapt and adjust. And so I always wanted to understand where people came from and what brought them to where they were. And I remember answering questions because whenever I tell someone I was born in India, immediately there's a lot of assumptions for wonderful reasons, and then some that are different. And so it's been interesting to really understand, and that we can't all fit into a neat, tidy box. And so for me, it's really letting people, the community has the wisdom and the insights, and for their voices to be heard and understood is so important to me. So when I get commissioned to do work, it's not actually the organizations or the funders. It's those that they're serving. I want to represent their voices in the best way and truest way that I can. And that's where I feel the most importance. So in terms of what that looks like in shifting power and centering voices, act of care in terms of how we listen and take this work forward, because it can become really extractive. I was so disjointed from the field when it feels extractive. It doesn't feel good for me, and it doesn't feel good for those that we're connecting with. So one of the other connections is what energy can we bring into evaluation, and that's really important to me. So growing up, people that were kind and curious was really helpful, and they listened to me as a young person, and we were there. And so how can I give back in that way to people that I speak and connect with in multiple ways? So that's really important to me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I think there is a transition because it's very personal, right? And also thinking, Mattea, about your reflection, which is also in the paper, which is about, well, I'm paraphrasing you now, and then you can elaborate and also correct me, that you don't know what regenerative evaluation is until you lead a regenerative life. So if you could speak to that.
Sure. I come to this work having been deeply shaped by my work with the Equitable Evaluation Initiative, and have been involved with that for the last 5 or 6 years or so. And a tension I'm often holding is that as this field of evaluation is evolving, I find that we often want to jump to the doing. Like, how do we do it? What are the tools? What are the methods? What are the ways? What are the practices? And I think that we wouldn't necessarily need to grapple with that question if we knew how to be regenerative, if we knew what a way of being a regenerative life was like. And I think about just in all aspects of life, where is love present? Where is fear present? How am I tending to relationships, not just in my work, in my evaluative work, but in all areas? And so I think that there's an interesting exploration when we take evaluation out of the center and we think of our work in evaluation as an extension. Because just in the practice of our second principle of regenerative evaluation, of just understanding who we are, I know that I come from a place, from a society that feels quite degenerative, where my worth and my being is not necessarily measured by what I can contribute to my community, but what I'm offering to the marketplace. My doing is often valued more than my being. So I have so much to unlearn. And so the invitation for me is to think about, how am I modeling dignity, justice, and love in all areas of my life? And by extension, to see that interwoven and flow through in my evaluation practice. So to understand that as I'm exploring and thinking about what is regenerative evaluation, how do I practice it, I'm not sure I'll ever fully understand until I really learn how to live it.
Thank you all so much for sharing your personal perspectives. And to briefly add, so my experience has been working in evaluation, and quite often then with the systems lens, realizing that if evaluation does not become part of the solution in terms of deepening empathy, deepening our relation to self and others, we are just perpetuating the same things that evaluation asks us to change. So there is this inherent paradox. So how can evaluation give more energy than it takes to ourselves, the people we work with, and also the causes that we care about? So that has been my personal guiding question in this. And thank you all so much for sharing your approaches, your personal experiences, and many of which are also in the living paper. And with an eye on time, we will transition now to breakouts. So the invitation is, you got to know us as the contributors, the people behind the living paper. And now we are inviting you to exchange with peers and have 12 minutes in breakouts before we then come back and look at the future of regenerative evaluation. So after everything that you have heard so far, and I'm typing the guiding question also in chat, after everything that you have listened to, your own personal experiences, what does regenerative evaluation mean to you in your daily practice? And what's the biggest living inquiry or attention you're holding right now. And if you want to add, what do you see as an opportunity in regenerative evaluation as it relates to your work?
I'm curious for folks who were in little breakouts and had some meaningful conversations that explored these questions around regenerative evaluation and what you might be seeing or seeing as opportunities. I'm curious if you could bring your voices forward. Feel free to raise your hand and we'll pin you and just have you start that weaving part. I'm curious what else is bubbling up for folks as you've kind of heard from a lot of the beautiful work that's been unfolding over time, and in many ways since time immemorial. So I want to just invite voices, reflections, learnings, noticings, and just feel free to come off mute, raise your hand. Don't be scared. Even my dog wants to say something. There we go. Go for it, Yvette. And please correct me if I say your name incorrect. I'm happy to be learning in front of the room. Okay.
Thank you. No, you said my name correctly. I had shared in my group, and I think something that's actually coming up for me is more of this quality of excitement. And it's about reestablishing bonds and the ways in which oftentimes clients that I have supported, where there is a breaking of bonds because of things that are required for evaluative purposes, whether it's having people fill out a questionnaire after every single service, or the relentless assign in here and fill out this paperwork or you're not going to be able to get this service, and the ways that the human bond and relationship is broken, and then staff being preoccupied with having to do all this reporting and feeling frustrated and not being able to tend to the actual needs of people in the community. And so that's something that's just really coming up for me, as the way that we can do our work that actually reestablishes bonds, and not just to people, but as you stated, place, and to other beings as well. And so, bonding and being in loving relationship is so important, and we lose that oftentimes with all of this evidence-based data collection methodologies. And so, yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Yvette. Yes, it's like shifting from that transactional to relational, right? I hear that. We're working on that in many ways here in Minnesota. Sophie, yes.
Hello, joining here from Germany. Yeah, I had a really nice talk, but I also have another idea I wanted to share, something that resonated here, because for example, I work with bottom-up city makers, and I think a lot of times there's no resources for retrospectives, and also there's especially when you work with city administrations, which important work, but if you have multi-stakeholder work, it's complex, and at the end when you're done, you're mentally drained, you don't want to talk about it anymore. And I think it's so important to have the retrospectives, and this resonates a lot with the community care aspect of your model. So I once we did just an impromptu fireside chat where we built a little den inside of a bank just to finish a process. And this was a really beautiful moment that's kind of resonated into this practice as well, just taking up the space to have the final conversation about a process. And I had a little bit the thought of, it would be nice if we put ourselves to service of other projects that have not the resources to have retrospectives themselves, because I think we lose a lot of knowledge there. So I invite you to my idea of retro riders, like a motorbike gang, but for people making retrospectives for fellow project makers. Yeah, this is my idea.
That's a beautiful way to think of like, how do we resource each other in service to this work? I hear that question rising in what you've just offered. I know we have just a couple more minutes left, and I want to make sure we can weave in with Anika and Otim. Thank you, Sophie, for bringing your voice in.
Hello, this is
Hello.
Otim from Uganda.
Welcome. Hi, Otim.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for everyone and for the team that has organized this discussion today. My only concern in regard to this new approach, I don't know, is it widely consulted like now, looking at different contexts, like now looking at the African context? Is it put is it also considered? Because maybe what has been done is only maybe looking at the context of maybe Europe, because this is where the team sits. Is it accommodative? Is it okay if maybe it is widened? The approach still goes ahead to widen and to incorporate different contexts, and also looking at already the challenges that the evaluation approaches are already facing. Is it also okay to try to bring those kind of challenges to accommodate that, so that this approach can try to address those challenges? Thank you.
Thank you for that. And bringing in more culture and context, I think, is critical as we think about what does regenerative evaluation mean here, wherever that here is where you are and your work is connected to. Anika, did I say your name correctly? I want to make sure. Oh, my hand went down. Where'd you go? There you are.
Yes, yeah, you said it correctly. Yeah. And my name is Annika, and I'm based in Copenhagen. Thank you so much for this. It's wonderful to hear what you put of efforts into this. Amazing. My question goes on probably all the dialogues you have had behind the scene with your different approaches. For me, at least, there are it's a different approach to have a systemic angle towards this compared to a more grassroots level perspective in respect to evaluation. So I was a little bit curious about, do you see it as a dialogue that goes together? Or is there a contradiction? And if there is so, how can we utilize that in a constructive way?
Oh my gosh, such a powerful question. I don't know what we'll have the time to go into that question today, but it is a beautiful question to bring to the community of practice for regenerative evaluation, because I feel everyone's voice would have some beautiful insights to offer into that. All right, Yannick, time check. I pass it back.
Thank you all for sharing, and yeah, really some good questions. And so what we are going to do now is I want to go through the invitations, because then you also know where, when, how you can actually bring in these inquiries and these questions. Because as I shared in the very beginning, this started as a community. This will develop as a community and as a collective effort. And you are part of that. So looking ahead, the rough timeline is that we have our launch today, so you can access the living paper. We have 3 public events coming up where we dive into some of these more specific topics, dialogue series in April, and then start community events, which is gatherings and case clinics again in June, and also giving ourselves some time, because we have been 80 members. I think almost 400 of you said you are interested in joining the community of practice. We are not resourced and funded at all, so we have to figure this out, because there's so much potential, and any support right now, because we see the relevance, we see the yearning, we see the potential to resource and ground this work, is highly appreciated. So what this means is 2 events which are already public, a 3rd which will be public soon. 1, from attribution to contribution, cultivating a theory of systems change with the Impact Garden. So that's with our friends, Systems Change Educators Unite. It's an event. And the other one is Regenerative M&E for Post-Growth Decolonial Marketing, which, to your point, Caroline, I think it speaks then also to the private sector a bit more. So 2 upcoming events that you can join. Information will be in chat or already is. You can join the community of practice. So again, there's a form. All this will be shared with you afterwards for you to fill it out. And we are working on a community platform and thinking about some onboarding sessions in May, early June, so that in June we can go into the community practice again more. And all this to say that we are looking to resource the community of practice and regenerative evaluation as an emerging approach to evaluation. So we have put together a case for 18-month funding of this work, and we are looking for interested foundations and other actors who are interested in resourcing regenerative evaluation, which is resourcing the backbone, the shared stewardship and infrastructure, and as you can see here, 4 thematic areas, which is about learning journeys, strategic engagement, advocacy, the open source applications and design, and also practitioner micro grants, also to strengthen accessibility. So I also want to give you just a few seconds. If you know of any foundation, somebody working in a foundation, knowing somebody who might know somebody, please drop it in chat as a private message. You can also share it afterwards. This is our priority number 1 moving forward, that we resource this work, because we want to grow and we want to keep the relational spirit of the community of practice. We are planning a roadshow with the living paper, which is accessible now. So you can share it widely and freely. You can invite us to your space, your network, your organization, to host a joint session. Some of you already did on LinkedIn and other channels. Again, inviting you, if you have a network, you can drop it in chat to everybody as a private message, and we will pick this up later. So we would really love to bring this work to different audiences, to different communities. And we are also establishing bridges to the wider field. So, for example, we are in conversation with the European Evaluation Society, American Evaluation Association, newly emerging International Evaluation Association. So there are these connections forming. And Kirsten, I know you said that you will speak a bit to this. I'll just go through and then we see with time. Again here, if you think there is an actor like an evaluation society, somebody else who should hear about this work, we would appreciate an introduction and a connection. And big thank you to those of you who already created these bridges. Also speaking about accessibility, this is something that came up in a call just last Friday. So big thank you, Meredith, for pointing this out. Translations for the short version. So this is community sourced, this work. And if we can make this accessible in other languages, which is translating 3-4 pages, the short version of this paper into different languages, we highly appreciate it. So there is a form, a Google form also in chat that you can fill out. If you say, hey, I can translate that into a certain language, I can support the translation of this, please let us know. And lastly, there is also an invitation to the Regenerative Signal, which is a professional development program, which has a price tag, I hope very accessible, a price tag on it. But this is really like a 5-part online program to dive deeper into some of the models and frameworks and how we can bring regenerative evaluation to our organizations and to our work. So there's also a Q&A session on April 1st. All this will also be shared with you afterwards, because the invitation really is to apply this, to grapple with this, to dive into the paper, to read and reflect, to join the community of practice with some patience in terms of when the community sessions actually start, and to reach out to us. So wholeheartedly encouraging, inviting you, reach out, whatever channel is most comfortable, so that we can share this work out wide and far and live into, I think some of you called it like a future fit approach to evaluation, and one that honors the deeply personal, the relational, and also the systemic. With this and looking at the time, a wholehearted thank you to all of you in the community, all of the contributors who made the paper possible, Unity Effect team, and also just all of you for being who you are and for showing up. And maybe as a transition out, we can take a breath and embody a posture in terms of what's alive for you, a posture that your body wants to do as you are leaving this online space. And we can all unmute.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you
so
very much,
much.
everyone.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Bye all.
Thank you so
Bye.
much,
Thank
team.
you.
Thank you.